For as much as this people refuseth the waters of Shiloah, that go softly, and rejoice in Rezin and Remaliah's son, therefore behold, the Lord bringeth upon them the waters of the river, strong and many, even the king of Assyria and all his glory. He shall come up over all his channels, and go over all his banks, and he shall pass through Judah. He shall overflow and go over, he shall reach even to the neck, and the stretching out of his wings shall fill the breadth of thy land, O Emmanuel.
Hello. I just had a mistake there. All right. Thanks for joining me. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing today in chapter 26 of Genesis. Let's begin reading. And there was a famine in the land, beside the first famine that was in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went unto Abimelech, king of the Philistines, unto Gerar. And the Lord appeared unto him and said, Go not down into Egypt. Dwell in the land which I shall tell thee of. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with thee, and I will bless thee. For unto thee and unto thy seed will I give all these countries, and I will perform the oath which I swear unto Abraham thy father. All right. And I, excuse me, that caught me quick. And I will make thy seed to multiply as the stars of heaven, and will give unto thy seed all these countries, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because that Abraham obeyed my voice, and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. And Isaac dwelt in Gerar. And the men of the place asked him of his wife, and he said, She is my sister, for he feared to say, She is my wife. Lest, said he, the men of the place should kill me for Rebekah, because she was fair to look upon. And it came to pass, when he had been there a long time, that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out at a window, and saw, and behold, Isaac was sporting with Rebekah his wife. Abimelech called Isaac and said, Behold, of a surety she is thy wife. And how saidest thou, She is my sister? And Isaac said unto him, Because I said, Lest I die for her. And Abimelech said, What is this thou hast done unto us? One of the people might have lightly lined with thy wife, and thou shouldest have brought guiltiness upon us. And Abimelech charged all his people, saying, He that toucheth this man or his wife shall surely be put to death. Easy law. Hold on. Then Isaac sowed in that land, and received in the same year 100-fold, and the Lord blessed him. Excuse me, one more time. We're going to see if I can clear this up. Should have gone to a different screen for that, but whatever. All right. And Isaac, the Lord blessed him. And the man waxed great, and went forward, and grew, until he became very great. For he had possession of flocks, and possession of herds, and great store of servants. And the Philistines envied him. For all the wells which his father's servants had digged in the days of Abraham his father, the Philistines had stopped them, and filled them with earth. And Abimelech said unto Isaac, Go from us, for thou art much mightier than we. And Isaac departed thence, and pitched his tent in the valley of Gerar, and dwelt there. And Isaac digged again the wells of water, which they had digged in the days of Abraham his father. For the Philistines had stopped them after the death of Abraham, and called their names after the names by which his father had called them. And he called their names after the names by which his father had called them. And Isaac's servants digged in the valley, and found there a well of springing water. And the herdmen of Gerar did strive with Isaac's herdmen, saying, The water is ours. And he called the name of the well Esek, because they strove with him. Probably means striving. We'll go back. And they digged another well and strove for that also. And he called the name of it Sitnah. And he removed from thence, and digged another well, and for that they strove not. And he called the name of it Rehoboth. For he said, For now the Lord hath made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land. And he went up from thence to Beersheba, and the Lord appeared unto him in the same night, and said, I am the God of Abraham thy father. Fear not, for I am with thee, and will bless thee, and multiply thy seed, for my servant Abraham's sake. And he builded an altar there, and called upon the name of the Lord, and pitched his tent there. And there Isaac's servants digged a well. Then Abimelech went to him from Gerar, and Ahazath, one of his friends, and Phicol, the chief captain of his army. And Isaac said unto them, Wherefore come ye to me, seeing ye hate me, and have sent me away from you? And they said, We saw certainly that the Lord was with thee. And we said, Let there now be an oath betwixt us, even betwixt us and thee, and let us make a covenant with thee, that thou wilt do us no hurt, as we have not touched thee, and as we have done unto thee nothing but good, and have sent thee away in peace. Thou art now the blessed of the Lord. And he made them a feast, and they did eat and drink. And they rose up betimes in the morning, and sware one to another. And Isaac sent them away, and they departed from him in peace. And it came to pass the same day that Isaac's servants came, and told him concerning the well which they had digged, and said unto him, We have found water. And he called it Sheba. Therefore the name of the city is Beersheba to this day. And Esau was 40 years old when he took to wife Judith, the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Bishema, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, which were a grief of mind unto Isaac and to Rebekah. So these Esau didn't marry well, and he took two bad wives. Think about that. You know, however difficult your marriage is, imagine doubling it. It doesn't, because again, it doesn't get easier with another woman involved. Believe me. I mean, not believe me like I know. I mean, just from reading it, I believe me, I think I understand. Not because I've experienced it. I'm not saying anything about my own marriage. I'm just saying it's difficult to be married. It's a challenge. I mean, you have to get along with someone. You have someone else in your life that you really need to get along with. You really want to get along with, and if you have a good relationship there, it serves as an anchor for the rest of your life. For your children and everything else. So it's a very important relationship to get right, and getting it wrong can lead to disaster. I mean, broken homes and all that, and people don't think, oh, no big deal. Kids turn out fine. Yeah, kids are anti-fragile. They tend to adapt, right? You can put them through all kinds of garbage, and they will manage to turn out okay. They may hate you in the end, but they'll be all right. They may, there's a lot of different things that can happen, is the point. You are not just raising a person, you're also forging your own relationship with your children. And the kind of life you're leading around that is going to affect things too. Anyways, so... well, that's later in the chapter anyways. But there's, again, that's pretty much all there is to say on the matter as far as, don't think, people sometimes think, well, in the Old Testament, polygamy was allowed. But Jesus makes it very clear that is not in the intention. He says it is for a man to have a wife. God made them male and female. That a man should leave his father and mother and cling unto his wife. It says wife, not wives. The taking of wives is a result of men gaining a lot of power and stuff and being able to have, especially if you're not really forming good relationships, you're just marrying women. Like I think of it as important. In times past, in different cultures, it was important, but it maybe isn't emphasized. Oh boy. Okay, so now there's this family. So let's just go back to this. Polygamy is a bad idea. I've known of Christians who've gone. The reason I know of Christians who thought, we'll bring in, we'll go polygamy. It's okay because it's in the Old Testament. It's not okay. It's wrong. You shouldn't do it. Again, it's not. Well, Jacob, doesn't he have two wives? But he doesn't. He doesn't go about intending that. And if you end up with two wives, that's just what it is. You can't betray the one over the other. That's another thing. You're not supposed to. If your man has two wives, there were laws governing it, just like divorce. There were laws about divorce. That doesn't mean God approves of divorce. You can have laws that govern things that the thing itself is undesirable. Like abortion. You could have, because there's some place for abortion. Perhaps. I hear, right, that there's a point where it's either the baby or the mother. It's one or the other. That one will die and the other will live, and you got to choose. Okay, I don't know if that's actually true, but I mean, if that's the case, yes, there's a place for an abortion there. And there could be laws around it. Even the things we have that are allowed, there are laws that govern, like the practice of medicine and all that stuff, food and drugs. We don't just, we have, that makes me think of the laws we're about to talk about. Like, what laws? Abraham followed a bunch of laws? Yeah, apparently so. Anyway, so famine in the land, this is different besides the one we were talking about before. And it's funny that it says it's a different famine. I think that's funny because I think it's obvious. But what's even funnier is it doesn't say there's a different Abimelech, because there probably is. It's probably not the same Abimelech, because Abimelech, like I said, is a title. It means like father king, basically. Abi, my father, the king. My father, the king of the Philistines. I wonder if it says my father, the king, like that in the Hebrew. Probably, yeah. Probably. Let's see. Abimelech, father is king. Oh, they say father is king. I thought Abi would be my father, but whatever. I don't know. He knows better than I. All right, Melech. Yeah, and so the king, I'll just show you what I saw and confirm. Yeah, there's two words there. In the first one, well, Abimelech is, of course, his name. You see Melech in there. He's Abimelech, the king, the Melech. Abimelech, Melech of Gerar, the Philistine king. And he goes, and there's this famine, and he goes into the Philistines. He's still in the general area of Palestine, of course, and that's in the Lord. He may be, hold on a second. Okay, he is in the land, and then the Lord appears to him. And this is what he says, do not go down into Egypt. Maybe he's considering it because of the famine. Because later on, Jacob does go down into Egypt, and I assume it's only with the Lord's approval. But they do, as he's already said, they will be captives in a land that is not their own. He already told Abraham remember that moment when the darkness came over Abraham, and then he heard about how they would become slaves in Egypt and all that. I don't know if it specified Egypt, but it said they would be slaves. And so he do not dwell in the land which I shall tell you of. Again, I will lead you where you dwell. It's usually the Palestine, as we call it today. That's the Roman term for it. It's Israel, we can't call it now. The original name, of course, was Canaan. Canaan, and then subdivided into Gerar and all these other regions. They took on different names when the Jews conquered the land, or the Israelites. The appropriate way to describe them at that time, because they were all one nation. And so then he goes on and reiterates the promises. Sojourn in this land, I will be with you. I will bless you, for unto you and unto your seed I will give all these countries. And I will perform the oath which I swear unto Abraham thy father. It's interesting because he dwells in the land in tents, and as his father did, and also as a kind of, they're living there. But we get the sense that they're strangers. There's already like nations in place, and it gets uncomfortable. Because Abraham and Isaac themselves are almost like petty kings. And it starts to make people in the neighborhood nervous, because he gets so powerful. With the multiplying of the herds, and then the workers, and then he's got all these people working for him. He's got servants. He's got armed men probably and stuff. Abraham did. I mean, all the men would have arms of some sort to fend off wild animals and stuff. So yeah, they're armed. And and he's big. You know, they are greater than us. He's a big deal. So they don't exactly own it, though. They like move around, look for places where nobody's, occupying, and then he kind of takes over, and sometimes he clashes with the locals and stuff. You can see how eventually the Israelites, when they come as conquerors, because eventually, because of the great differences, remember, Isaac has already been circumcised. He's already set himself apart. They're already like, I don't know if it's that those girls are Hittites. I don't think that it's a race. Well, if they were, it wasn't the racial aspect, because that's not it. Like Joseph's wife is an Egyptian, I believe, right? So it's not like, oh, don't marry people of another ethnicity, let's say. It's like I said, and if you look at the genealogy, they're all pretty closely related anyways. Right? At least according textually, So, the man went too far. I wanted to see the rest of the promises. I want to talk about it a little bit more. All right, well, I skipped way ahead. Yeah, I will. I will perform the oath which I swear unto Abraham thy father. I will make thy seed to multiply as the stars of heaven, and will give unto thy seed all these countries, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. That is the most important part of the promise, because that is the part that is fulfilled by Christ. Because the Jews do not fulfill that role. They are not that big a blessing. Not compared to Jesus. If we had nothing else to compare it to, yeah, in a sense. And of course, they carried the scriptures forth. They got a lot of credit. They brought forth Jesus. I'm not trying to, me, I do not believe in boasting against the branches. I don't believe it. And I certainly reject all ideas of anti-Semitism because, again, boast not against the branches. It's hazardous to your health, to your eternal security also. I would not be... It's not good to be against any people based on their ethnicity or on their calling of God or whatever, or their perceived this, that, the other. Whenever people try to group people into one little group to demonize them, that's evil. Just like what they do with white people today. They always say, oh, white people this, white people that. It's like you're demonizing white people and you're making a worse future for everyone. Because it isn't good for anyone when you demonize a group of people. You say, oh, you're just afraid. It's like, well, yeah, there's that. Being the group. But if it was any other group, I would say the same thing. I thought we learned this lesson. We learned this lesson. Apparently, some other people have not. That's too bad. Because if it goes back to it, eventually what they will do is they'll drive the white people all together into a group, and then they'll have to fight for their survival. If that happens. I don't want that to happen, but it's like, I want to survive. So we should fight against this racism in our time. Anyways, but because Christ came to bless all the nations of the world, not just the Jews, and not just the white people, right? He came to bless all nations, that in the seed of that woman, but particularly the seed of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and in particular of the seed royal, Christ himself, born of woman, came into the world, died on the cross, and wrought eternal salvation in his resurrection for every one of us if we would believe in him. And that's a very important, it's an important condition to that promise. You got to believe. And Abraham's promise, though God was there to, again, he believed God. Because that he obeyed my voice and kept my charge. The belief was counted for righteousness. But it also does something. When we genuinely believe, when we have faith, it just changes how we behave. And if our behavior is unchanged based on belief, then we have a deficit of faith. You know what I mean? I have faith in, Jesus said, if you had faith as the grain of a mustard seed, you could say to this mountain, be removed and cast in the sea. You do not need much faith to be saved. I know that because when I received the Holy Spirit, I was barely believing. And I had a lot of doubts. And when the experience happened, it caused me to believe a whole lot more. And it has that way. Abraham heard God's voice, but then he had greater and greater encounters with God, if you think about it. It's like he starts off just hearing this calling, get up and go. It doesn't say he appeared to him. Well, it does say that. Yeah. Actually, I know I don't remember if it says it in Genesis, but I know that Stephen says it, right? The God of glory appeared unto Father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia before he came to Paran. So, yeah, so he appeared to him. So that's a big deal. When God appears to you, that has a way of infusing you with faith. Now, it doesn't, when you consider how strong faith could be, it doesn't necessarily, because you could start to question it and say, like, well, maybe I was hallucinating. Maybe I was dreaming. Maybe this, maybe that. Maybe it was an alien. Maybe it was demons tricking with me. There's all kinds of counterfactual. Maybe some of that isn't plausible. So maybe some of it is. But it doesn't matter because you can still doubt. People think that they have an experience that will remove all doubt and then no necessity for faith because you just know. I think I know God exists. I think I know Jesus rose from that. I think I know all that stuff, and I'm not absolute about it. I mean, I absolutely believe it. But the point is, I don't believe it to the point where it stops me in my tracks at every time I might think to sin. And it should. It should stop me dead in my tracks. And I put that down to some sort of deficit in my faith. It's not strong enough. Because if I had strong enough faith, again, I could move a mountain, I can move God. But how do I move myself? That's the hardest thing, I think. The hardest thing is to move my will by faith. And I think it can be done, but I just say it's not. All I'm saying is, like, it takes a lot of faith to really, to put on Christ, to stand before God, as it says of Abraham. He stands before God. I also think of that in terms, I've talked about that a bit in terms of, I think that it indicates a cleanness of conscience. That's another aspect of the standing before God, I think, is an indication of a clean conscience, because there's no way you could stand before God without a clean conscience. You would fall down you'd crumble into a pile of blubbering, begging for mercy. That is what naturally would happen, because your conscience would wake up and start saying stuff. Guaranteed. And it might be God touching it and saying, talk to him a bit. Talk to him a bit. Tell him. Because you will know. When you come into his presence, And so to stand before him boldly like that, you have to have a clean conscience. Christ gives us the access to that. But the thing is, and I think that ultimately we get there, through the resurrection. But in this life, I'm far from standing before God, as far as I'm concerned. I don't feel that cleanliness all the time. Sometimes I do. I do regularly feel like I can commune with the Lord and not be, I'm not there supplicating, but I'm learning, I'm accessing his strengths and such. And all for the purpose of obedience. Because it's not, how shall you who are accustomed to disobedience ever learn to obey? How? Well, with a man, this is impossible. With God, nothing is impossible. So I still aim at the goal, which is Christ himself, and I still expect at every moment to get there. And nothing discouraged, because Christ has us. We are in his hand. He has saved us, and we can trust in that. That gives us a platform from which to reach to the utmost. Because we cannot fall. We cannot fail. He kept the charge. God charged him with things. He said, do this. Do something. Circumcise. He did what I told him to. My commandments, my statutes, and my law. Was there a whole lot of law that God gave him? Well, I would say on two levels you could look at it. One, God could be speaking of just the laws of men that are just, that Paul speaks about in terms of that the government has a purpose and a role, and the powers that be are ordained of God in order to keep order and to punish evildoing. And to make a society in which it's tolerable to live, by which we don't have people running around just doing whatever they want. because people just can't do whatever they want. If you let them do that, then they'll do awful things to each other. So there have to be laws of men. There were laws of men in the days of Abraham. Some people try to act like the Ten Commandments were the first law ever. That's not true. It's not even said in the scriptures like it's the first law ever. Okay, there's no weirdness like, oh, Hammurabi had a law first. It's like there were laws before Hammurabi. That was just the first written code we discovered. We discovered Hammurabi's code, and we look, it's the first. People are so people jump to conclusions a lot of times, or they go too far. We don't know what other laws there were. This is evidence that in Abraham's time, there was some, and again, you can see it in the customs that they observe. In the fact that the king isn't like, adultery? What do you mean? Adultery is perfectly fine. Some societies are like that. Like I'm never sure how to say it, Lacedaemonians, or the Spartans as they're better known. I have this old book and it calls them Lacedaemonians. Lacedaemonians. Something like that. And I don't know when it got changed to Sparta. Probably when people realized that there was a name for it that was easier to pronounce, to tell you the truth. But in Sparta, in that book, it has all this account of what they were like. It was written back in the Greeks, talking about these things, writing about these things. And they didn't have, adultery was sort of illegal in that marriage was kind of illegal. Any man, you were to be available to any man or woman or whatever. A man, no one possessed the other woman. They weren't possessed. They were much like our society where there's no, it's almost like there isn't marriage. They don't have an adultery ban in Sparta. Well, there you go. So not all laws are going to match up with the laws of God. And when they don't, then it's your duty to resist them. Or to fight them. I mean, with words and stuff like that. You don't have to necessarily start off. I wouldn't recommend getting in trouble with the law per se, but you have, like people, they used to do a lot of abortion clinic protesting, but then they passed a bunch of laws that meant you couldn't get close enough to do a lot of that stuff. And so they have to stay back, and there's all these rules. And if you don't follow those laws, you'll go to jail. I don't think they're good. I think they should be, I don't think people should be harassed as they go do something bad. But the idea that they're like, oh, but they're stopping them from getting abortions because they can hear them yelling and whatever. It's like, you know what? So what? Why is there such a positive interest in it? They're just so anxious to have people kill their babies. And it's said because a lot of people have this Malthusian, view that the Earth's population is getting to be too big for something. What? It's like we were feeding everybody a bit ago. As far as we have enough food, we have enough space. It's always people who live in cities that think this stuff because they are all crammed in together. Like, the world's too unpopulated. Oh, there's all these people everywhere. They're stuck in traffic. They're angry. That's where this idea comes from. It's like they need to get out a little more, I think. The Earth could easily support like 9 billion people. And it's probable the population is going to top out. And it's probably going to shrink, which is going to be a major problem. Like I said, a shrinking population causes all. You want to talk about slavery? That'll bring it back. Who's going to do all these crappy jobs? Well, these people over here, we don't want to do those jobs. We want to, oh no, we need someone to do those jobs. And you will do those jobs. And that's what they'll do. Eventually. Not tomorrow, not next week, not next year, not 10 years from now even. 50, 100. You see what comes. If they continue on that path. And then, because like I said, population is naturally leveling off. Like India doesn't have, their population quietly, not too long ago, stopped. They're beneath replacement. I remember when I was a kid, India was like one of those places where they had like 6 kids every family. But no, they're beneath. The rate at which they're reproducing is beneath replacement for their population. Almost like most countries are at that place now. Even countries that we formerly thought of as the fastest growing, like in Southeast Asia and stuff, they're all slowing down. And then with all the people they're killing with the you know what and the other stuff, we're going to start falling. And how far will we fall? Who knows? I don't. So there's also natural law, which, like in some way, it's not obviously he knew about the concept of natural law as we speak of it, but, there's a law of the conscience he was obedient to. But when it comes to my laws, my statutes, my commandments, those three commandments, statutes, and laws, that's something that comes up a lot later on. Like in the Psalms, like Psalm 119 talks about thy law, thy statutes, thy commandments, precepts. There's other word. There were I forgot how many words. There are special words that get used over and over again. Like law would be Torah, statutes probably mishpat. Commandments is mishpat, I think. Let's just look it up because they're the three things. Commandments is mitzvah, like bar mitzvah. Statutes, chukah, kukah, is what they call it, and then Torah. So mitzvah. Whatever I said before, I was probably thinking of mitzvah, and I just said some other word that was wrong because I don't even remember what was anymore. Mitzvah, mishpat. What is mishpat? It's like precepts or something like that. It's some other thing, commandments, because it's like it's something like that. Mitzvah, commandment. From Savah. All right. Anyways, there's no particular. The words are well translated, by the way. They're not. We don't need any further looking into that. So he heard God's voice. That's the important thing. If God speaks to us, we got to be obedient to that. When He gives us something to do, we got to follow up on it. Like I would say, a good example for a Christian. What is a charge? Well, getting baptized. That'd be a good charge. It's like something that we're told to do. It's not a big deal. Like I always say, people know, what is my doctrine? You ought to be baptized, right? You ought to be. You don't have to be, because it's technically not required, actually. But if you're a Christian, why wouldn't you get baptized? Jesus was baptized, right? Yeah, so get baptized. Be a good boy and get baptized like the rest of us. That's right. Don't be, some people, I got to show off that I don't have to be baptized. It's like, I don't know if that's a good idea. The purpose of faith is not to show off how I mean, like, oh, my faith is so strong. I don't need to be baptized. I don't need this. I don't need that. I mean, I get it. Like me saying, like Paul says about food, one person is weak and they eat only herbs. It might be something sacrificed to an idol, so I don't want to touch it. It's not even about clean and unclean. Because we don't want to make a mistake. Well, the carnal things it's easy to get caught up in because the real sin is down inside. You get too caught up keeping the outward commandments, you end up forgetting about down inside. Abraham, I think, down inside was truly close to the Lord. He walked before God. To me, that means, like I said, with a clean conscience. Like I said, whatever he had done, he had reconciled with God and had received of God mercy. I mean, like, I'm not saying that Abraham is perfect because it's not claimed such. It doesn't record like a lot of sinning, but again, we know he needs God's mercy because it said so. It says he found grace in God's eyes. We all need God's mercy. Okay. But that is because Abraham was faithful and did the things which God asked him to do. Whatever standard God is holding him to, Abraham has lived up to it. Whatever standard. And like I said, that's not necessarily because it's what he gives you. It's like the talents. You're given 2 talents. You're not expected to do the work of a guy who has 5. But what you're supposed to do with what you got, what you can. And so we ought to do it too, also with what we know. And we know a lot. We have a lot. We have the scriptures, complete. We don't have to speculate. on a lot of things of right and wrong. We just know because we've been taught since our youth. We know the law and we know Christ. And that's how we overcome sin, through Christ, not the law. Though, like I said, obedience to what God says is still something God wants us to perform. That's part of what it means to be a Christian. We offer ourselves, our bodies, as living sacrifices to God. Here I am, I'm a victim, ready for you to kill. You know? I am here. All right, so then he dwelt in Gerar, as Abraham had, and with the Abimelech, king of Gerar again. And like I said, it's just the new Abimelech. They asked him, they said, hey, how about that? Why? Hey, about that girl over there? Who's that lady? Who? Yeah, they were asking. I'm just saying. And so whatever, he was afraid. I don't know that they actually, but they inquired. It's like, oh, that woman, who is she? You know? And he's like, oh, that's my sister. Because like Abraham, he has this paranoia about his wife. That the guys are going to kill him and take her from her. It's funny. It's interesting. Because the Lord doesn't tell him this or anything like that. You know, it's like, so it's totally them. It's their thing. You know, and God doesn't hold it against them in any way, but it's like, but you know, Rebecca isn't his sister. Like Abraham has her, well, she is my sister, technically. No, he lied. And, he was trying to hide the truth, which is the same thing as lying. And I'm not condemning Isaac. If you think someone's your enemy, they don't deserve the truth. You know, if you think someone's going to kill you, you don't tell them where to put the knife. You know, I don't fault him at all for that. I don't owe the wicked the truth. So that way you're saying it's okay to lie? If someone's trying to kill me in the dark and they say, where are you? And I say, and I throw a rock in the dark to deceive them about where I am so that I can escape. You know, I've taught this before. Jesus escaping, all kinds of things. But they thought he was there. There's an element of deceit against the enemy. The enemy is allowed to believe lies. God will let the enemy believe lies. Because they love not the truth. You know, he gave them over to believe those things. Actually is what it says, right? Because they love not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. What was it? What did it say there? I'm trying to remember that they should believe a lie. What was it? Sent them a strong delusion? Yeah. Is that the strong delusion passage? Is that connected? Sometimes I get the scriptures all like connected. And so like which one, am I referring to one or two scriptures? So I'm going to just check that out. I know I'm in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. At least I know the address. Okay. It's just embarrassing because I have a song and I'm like, I can't remember the first part of the verse. Oh, I'm in 2 Thessalonians 1. I need 2. Because they receive not the love of the truth that they might be saved. And for this God shall send them a strong delusion, that they should believe a lie. Yeah, it is a strong delusion passage. That's what happens. God will send them a strong delusion. Deluding the enemy is not the same as lying. It isn't. But it's similar. I don't know. I don't know any other way. You know, it's similar. But like I said, like there's a level at which, no, the truth is you know what I mean? It's like, it's wrong to kill, but you got to die. You know what I mean? Like that's a fact. So, you know, yeah, there's that thing that like, yeah, God kills, God makes alive. He can do both. So it's sort of like he's got free reign. He's the judge. He has the right to judge us, the right to condemn us, and the right and the power to make us live. Yeah. So he says this ruse again, and except this time he gets busted. he was sporting with Rebecca. Sporting, what's that mean? Probably playing, some sort of intimate thing that made it obvious that's his wife. You don't do that with your sister, okay? That's not how you kiss your sister, buddy. I saw you playing with your sister, quote unquote, and I don't think she's your sister. Yeah, I think that's because you can tell a man. Because if it, let me just. I think it is. Sporting means playing, but let me just check. Sport to laugh. Interesting. Tasak, to laugh. Okay. It's related to his name, like Yitzhak, to laugh. But it's also translated in the New American Standard Bible, caressing. Let's see. Laughed and said, laughed to herself. It might mean something else in a different context. In fact, that's probably what they're going over here. It means to laugh. Feminine singular, laugh, concerning, imperfect, to just, and here they say it means in this context, to sport or play. So it has a different meaning. To toy with of conjugal caresses. Yeah, because that's what it means. Because he didn't see them just go, ha 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 ha. That's not what he saw. Interesting. So yeah, the word means to laugh, but just as the word, like we don't use it in English, but the verb to sport, which we don't use, like here he was sporting with her, means to play. And we just don't. It's an archaic. It feels weird to say, oh, let's go out and sport. You don't, because we think of sport as a noun that describes a class of games, right? It's sports. It's like this big deal in the world. Sports are everything. It is a religion in my mind for some people. It's like, or it replaces a sort of religion. It's like a team identity, or maybe it replaces race on some level, and that'd probably be good for people. I mean, just to channel your hostility into a game in which your one city fights the other. I think despite. I don't hate sports. In fact, I think it's very important for children. I'm just not a big spectator of sports. And I'm not condemning anyone for watching football or anything like that. My dad loves football. He watches it all the time. But, we don't want to we can become too caught up in it, though, obviously, just like anything. You got to know where the limits are. Don't become a fanatic in anything, Because it's a little weird, right? I do think it's weird. I'm sorry. If anyone has like team jerseys hanging on their wall and stuff, I don't think it's that weird, but it's a little, wearing another man's jersey always struck me as odd. You know what I mean? It's like using the same number, but like walk around like with a jersey on and it's got like some guy's last name on the back. It feels a little, I don't know. I'd feel a little gay. I would. I would feel a bit gay wearing that. I don't know. So cheers to you who don't feel that way, because you got it. You're fine. You don't worry about it. It's just me. It's totally me. It's like, I don't think you're gay when you do it, but I would feel that way. So because I don't really think about it at all. I see some guy wearing Brett Favre's jersey. I just say that name because I see a lot of those because I live in Northern Illinois. So you see a few Packers stuff. It's around. There's Packer fans and then there's Bear fans, basically. And then there's fans of other teams from, because maybe they come from. But, anyways, sport, play. We don't need to go on about sports. The importance of sporting. It is good for kids, though, to enjoy. They need physical activity. You can't have kids sitting around playing video games all the time. It's absolutely unacceptable. They need to get out and play. And if they're not out playing, they need to get into organized sport and do that, because it is essential. If your children are overweight, they don't play enough. They don't play enough. Not getting out and play enough physical activity and play. And it could be junk food and sugar. Yeah, you got to cut out a lot of that sugar and junk food. It's good before you have kids. Think about it. Do not avoid this. Don't start bad habits early. Don't be. Here's another thing, and this is kind of weird. I guess is off topic. Not really. It's somewhere in there, but like it goes for a lot of things. When you got kids, do not never let them have cake, or never let them have potato chips, or never let them have candy bars. You will create this suppression effect, like Freud would talk about, even though he's whatever. It's like this part's true. It's like if you repress certain things, like my parents, they tried to, my dad tried to have me become sexually more pure than he grew up by basically just telling me women were evil and I should stay the hell away from them. But that is not a good strategy, because it made that forbidden fruit aspect of it made it very interesting. And it should have been more like, you're going to, you like the way girls look. You probably noticed a long time ago how pretty they are. You don't ask a boy if he likes girls. You tell him they like her. You probably do. I mean, like I said, I know some kids claim to be gay from a youth. Maybe they find women intimidating. I know they can be. I mean, because they're when you do admire their beauty and all that and stuff, it's like, they can easily just rip your heart out as a guy. It's hard. But what I would say is, don't over repress things. At one time when the kids were young, I introduced them to the Three Stooges, because I like Three Stooges stuff, comedy, and we had a discussion about, some of the ladies were, pretty and sort of, and the Stooges do this, they all get, gaga over the women and they misbehave. And I'm like, I think the kids understand that what they're doing is misbehaving. And if I work too hard to try to make them never see a beautiful woman, what'll happen is they're just going to go out in the world and see beautiful women. And it's going to be like that cartoon. I mean, if you totally keep them away from everything, it's like that cartoon you remember from Tex Avery back in the day. I know more about cartoons than most people, because actually I do. It's part of what I do. But anyways, Tex Avery, the cartoon with the two, I wasn't sure if they're supposed to be wolves or foxes, right? But they go, there's the country. It's like the story of the country mouse and the city mouse, but the country wolf comes to the city and he sees the beautiful woman performing and he loses his mind. The first beautiful woman he sees, he just loses his mind. And there was also a movie a couple of years ago, I think it was called Captain Amazing or something. It was about a dad and the mom, and they live like in the wilderness, and they raise their kids in this sort of austere yet, they've departed from society, and they kept their sons. They've grown up essentially alone in the woods with their family. And he goes into the towns for the first time. The young man's seeing other girls for the first time, just about literally, because he's been raised away from all that, and he doesn't know how to talk. He doesn't know how to behave. He asks her to marry him or something. I think I'm in love. The first beautiful kind of slutty girl he runs into. And that's how it's played in the movie. It's not something that he should be losing his mind over. It's clear that no one's ever talked to him about relationships or what he's facing in the future. And that's one of the things in the movie. It's like that shelteredness. I never intend to shelter my children. I mean, I shelter them from the worst things, but not from everything. You're crazy. You'll make them weak. You have to make them face challenges. And they're not just physical challenges, because that's what sports are good for. But sports are good for physical. Physical challenges will lead to emotional stability. Because when you learn to be emotionally in possession of yourself in the midst of a stressful situation where you're literally fighting, and to learn to deal with loss, and to learn, it's very important lessons for kids. Well, especially, I recommend wrestling, starting around 7. Some people start them earlier. I'm not big on that. It depends on the kid. It's going to depend on the kid. Some kids are ready for it at 4 or 5. Others you might want to wait till they're a little older. Okay, just because I give that advice, I think people might take that advice. I want you to know, do not plunge them in necessarily. Look at your kid, and also help them. Help them learn it. Be active in whatever sport they're in to help make them good at it. I put a lot of effort in helping not just my kids. They don't just go to wrestling. I go there and I coach them and I make sure they get good. I want them to be, maybe not the best. I mean, I don't try to not make them the best. I try to make them the best they can be. But ultimately, they have to do it themselves. I help. It's up to them. Well, it is important enough to. I realize it's like I'm trying to figure out what the textual connection was. It was because of husbands and wives. But anyways, but like I said, because I didn't want to say, don't over shelter your children, expose them to challenges. Your boys are going to see beautiful women. That doesn't mean you should show them pornography. It just means you can't. You're not going to be able to prevent them from encountering short skirts in life, and cleavage. And so, you don't want to necessarily watch movies that are called short skirts and cleavage. I mean, they're just filled with that sort of thing, obviously. But you also have to realize it's like there's no way to get away from temptation and sin in this world. They will face it. The way, of course, is Jesus. But I mean, in this world, you will encounter sin and temptation, and your children will, and they will fall to it, just as you did. I always say to people sometimes, you want to raise your children right, like Abraham raised Isaac. Obviously, he raised him right. God speaks to Isaac, That's something I like, that God appears to him. Again, it's important. God doesn't appear to everybody. We know that. It's rare. Even when I received the Holy Spirit, I was greeted by people who were at the church with skepticism. Because I had all this stuff I said happened. And, whatever. I said mostly does things for me because, for the most part, it probably brings me down a notch in the eyes of a lot of people. I would think. Because it's always this uncomfortable. I'm sure I don't know. I've never asked friends of mine, but like, if you haven't experienced something like that, every time I bring it up, it's probably got to be a bit uncomfortable, part of the listening. And I understand that. It would be uncomfortable for me too. I'd be like, I wish you wouldn't talk about that so much, But it's impossible for me not to. But and it's not that is Abraham special? Well, it's not that, or Isaac special. Well, yeah, in a certain sense. God has chosen him. God is making him to be this father of nations. Abraham, and now Isaac is the inheritor of that promise because he also is father of nations, essentially. The son of laughter. And so, how he was raised has a lot to do with that. And, all of us, we want, that's one of the things you want as a parent. You want your children to also partake of the faith. And I say the critical thing on all that stuff is to do not cram the faith down their throat, and do not try to make them walk so strictly as regard to sin that you don't compensate for the fact that they're just humans like you. You're not raising angels. You won't be. So, but you can have very good results. You can have a good relationship with your kids. You can take delight in them, and be, blessed in them, and the joy you receive from them because of that. I didn't get very far in this chapter. I'm almost at the end of an hour. What is this you have done unto us? One of the people might have lightly lied with thy wife. It's true. It might have I wonder what she would have said about that. I don't know about that. So again. But again, an unattached middle-aged woman. I don't know how old she was, And so I like his little law he makes. He says, all right, anyone who touches this man or his wife goes to death. It's like, leave him alone. They didn't think of killing him ahead of time, but, this keeps coming up. It's an interesting fear he has. And it says, because he isn't part of them. He doesn't know them. He feels very much exposed. Like I said, he's not in the country among his people. She's not in the country among her people. They're in the midst of strangers. And they've got their servants and their cattle and their herds. That's it. Okay. Oh, it all goes back to that sporting, didn't it? Playing with his wife. It's good to sport with your wife too, I guess, right? It was a play. Not necessarily something explicit, but enough. Explicit enough. Caressing her, maybe putting his arm on her shoulder in a particularly affectionate way. Anything, because there are certain things you can tell when people are connected to each other intimately. Because of the way, well, it doesn't always show, but like sometimes they'll do things publicly, small signs of affection that betray the fact that they have this intimate relationship. You know. Of course, if you, the gag that came in my mind is, of course, if you're Joe Biden, you never know who his wife is because he kisses everybody. He makes plays on everybody. So you might mistake Hillary Clinton for his wife or some small child. Because he likes to sniff their hair and get real. You know what I mean? It's like if someone was sniffing my wife's hair, well, I'd probably punch him. You know what I mean? Don't touch my wife, because I would look at it as an assault. They touched her hair. Well, you have no right to touch her, grabbing her hair and sniff it. Now I know that actually, it's funny. The woman they always show Joe Biden sniffing, she didn't mind. She was a friend, so she thought he was being nice and affectionate. So that's the truth about that. But some of those kids don't. I don't think so. Some of those pictures are not as what we call innocent. Because like that, it looks weird. She looks a little uncomfortable. Maybe she's just lying when she says she wasn't uncomfortable. But even so, there's a lot more pictures than that, right? Everyone's seen it. Just a little weird, right? A little too affectionate. Well, Isaac isn't like that. He's isn't the kind of guy that goes sniffing other men's wives' hair. And so Abimelech thinks that that's his wife. Surely that's your wife, right? I saw you sniffing her hair. I know I keep saying that. So, and the man waxed great and went forward. I wonder what that means. That's some sort of idiom, right? And grew. And I think it's went on. He went on, like we use that idiom today. Or a similar one, right? Like we say, the man waxed great, he went on and grew until he became very great. He went on. And so I'm going to take it as that, like it's just that sort of a very, because again, we say that phrase, he went on, but what do we really mean? We just meant he kept going in a direction metaphorically, not physically, right? He's not physically traveling straight. You know what I mean? Like, that's not what it's saying. It's saying he just kind of went into the future. He went on growing. And had possessions of flocks, herds, great store of servants, and the Philistines envied him. It's a little touchy. Maybe his thoughts. Well, again, he feared envy. And you know what? Sometimes you do well to remember the envy of man. Men for envy will do wicked things to each other. It's no doubt that envy played a large role in Cain's murder of Abel. Because his own works were evil and his brother's righteous. It's pretty much, that's the stage for envy. Looking at someone else and feeling the rage that comes from the comparison. And it's such a weird thing because I guess I say that. I don't know. I shouldn't say that. Because again, I always forget. Certain sins do not affect me terribly. Like I don't feel a lot of envy. there's not a lot I want out of life. And also I've been gifted with many things. So what is there for me to envy? I could envy the success of the wicked, I guess, I don't know. I could envy the riches of the rich, I suppose. I don't desire those things. I don't, because if you desire, you go after them. I envy the righteousness of Christ. I envy the purity of his words. Yes. I want to be like him. He's the only one I envy. The only person I'm envious of is Jesus. I want everything he has. I want his throne. I want his rod. I want his, I want his crown. Not to take it, not as an usurper, of course, but as an inheritor. And so, I mean that I'm jesting somewhat when I say I envy Christ. But I do, I don't have a big struggle with envy myself. And I'm not saying that to virtue signal. I'm only saying that because I was about to say, I don't get envy. Why people who envy? It's like, just because you don't feel something, don't rag on other people who do. Because it's a feeling, it's hard to control. I have feelings I find hard to control. When sadness gets hold on me, it gets hold on me. It gets tight, and I don't like it. I don't want people to see me emotionally driven. in that direction, especially. I'm more of a, my sins are of despair and things like that, not envy. No, I don't envy men and their whatever. Maybe I do sometimes. Sometimes I do, sure, a little bit. And like I said, everyone envies a bit, right? I'm not saying I'm immune. But how do we get there though? If we do have a problem with envy? Well, it's lusting after evil things is the worst part. When you're properly looking for good, there's no lust in it, because you're looking, when I want to be righteous like someone, my attitude towards them is different than when I say I want to be rich like them. Now, it could be admiration. That's not envy. You know what I mean? Like if you admire someone, you say, I want to be like them. You should reserve your greatest admiration for Christ, of course, but there are men who, I admire men like Thomas Sowell. I could name others. It's not jumping in my head. He always jumps out first because he's my favorite living human being. I would say that, but it's true. I like Thomas Sowell. I like his books. I've read most of them. Okay. So but I don't envy the man, his success or his books or anything like that. But I think I would like to write a book too. But it doesn't drive me with passion and anger. Envy, when we truly feel it, because we resent the person in some way for being better than us. And that's, I think that's the part where I just can't get on board. I just never been able to, I always blame myself for my shortcomings. I don't have the narcissism to blame others, because that's what narcissists do. They blame others for their shortcomings. And I've never been able to do that. Like literally in my mind, I'm always the one who's at fault. It's me. That's where my troubles lie. Don't have the problem per se, Like I said, I don't feel eaten or driven by it, but man, when people have stuff, people envy them, and it's wicked, and it leads to all kinds of sins like stealing, covetousness. We have to put our focus on the things that we truly, when we set our hearts on things which are above, there's no room for envy. Because all gifts come. Maybe I do. I think the closest I ever came to envy, and it probably is true. This is my. I have a wheelhouse where I am exceedingly envious, and it's just another brag. So I'm not going to go into it too much because it sounds like a brag. Because truly, what I'm envious of, preachers who corrupt God. When I see preachers and people listening to them, who preach false things, I admit I envy I don't envy covet that want their position, but I want to bring them down. I listen to them and I hate them. I don't want, I don't, do I hate them? I hate their words. And maybe them in some degree. Sometimes the wicked, I feel hatred for them. I know I should love them as Jesus said, but hey, it's just a natural thing, right? It's something to overcome. Love your enemies. That's something I have problems with. Yes, I'll confess my sins there. I have trouble loving enemies. Not in the sense of I'm able to do the love your enemy thing, feed him when he's hungry. That part I get because I know I'm pouring coals of fire on his head, and it gives me pleasure to take my enemy and to do him good. I get that sort of vindictiveness that is inherent in that. But there's also an aspect to which it's not really supposed to be vindictive. We're supposed to love our enemies. And that heaping of coals of fire is with the hopes of prospect of turning him from his sins to salvation. That's the Christian way. So I can't, even though my envy over, I'm jealous over the word of God. That's what I'm saying. I am exceedingly jealous over God's word. And of those who preach it falsely, I feel nothing but hatred. I do. I feel when I think of people preaching the gospel falsely, I think hate. I hate that. And I don't have any person in mind. I don't have any preacher in mind that I feel hatred for because I don't watch them. That's helpful. Because if I spend a lot of time watching a false teacher, like Arnold Murray, I consider him a false teacher. I do not hate the guy. The only thing I said, but I did set out to my purpose was to undermine and destroy his ministry, though. I wanted to destroy his ministry. I'm not saying I did, but I led some people away from it. Good. But like, I didn't feel personal animosity towards the man. I don't. I wouldn't know how to reach him as far as for good or evil. But so I at least have an example. I know where I've gone after someone, and I didn't feel any hatred for Arnold Murray. I hate the way he teaches. I hate his methods, the way he flatters his students to make them feel like they're really smart, and then anyone who doesn't agree with him is an idiot. It's really not. It's not a good teaching. That's not that. The way he teaches is wicked. That's what bugs me most, more than the content of his doctrine, even. Because I consider those things. I consider how I teach you, how I talk to you, to be important. It's not. I can't just do whatever I want. I can't just say whatever I want. I can't just please myself. I got to please him, capital H. You, I don't have to please. I just have to help you. So if I can be of help, then I will please my Lord. So then we get to the part of the wells. The Philistines envied him. We'll leave it up there. We'll talk about the wells and the thing. We'll get in. I promise we will get into the next chapter tomorrow. Why am I promising anything? Never mind. I'm not promising that. I hope we'll get into the next chapter tomorrow. That may be the case. So if we do, we may read the next chapter. But there's actually quite a lot of verses here, but it's just one story. So we'll see if we'll probably get through it fast. The Lord isn't speaking again. We don't have more commandments coming in. But God knows we know how to fill up an hour, don't we? All right. So thanks for joining me in this study. I do like talking about these subjects and the Word of God. Thanks for joining me. I'll be back again tomorrow. Friday, there will be no study. I'll be at the state wrestling tournament. You can wish Michael luck there. Thank you. And health and that no one gets injured. That's always my prayer. All right.
For as much as this people refuseth the waters of Shiloah, that go softly, and rejoice in Rezin and Remaliah's son, therefore behold, the Lord bringeth upon them the waters of the river, strong and many, even the king of Assyria and all his glory. He shall come up over all his channels, and go over all his banks, and he shall pass through Judah. He shall overflow and go over, he shall reach even to the neck, and the stretching out of his wings shall fill the breadth of thy land.